Welcome to Dragon from the West, where epic stories from my books come alive. Subscribe for more fantasy adventures.
Chapter 11 Crimson Blade Bandits. The forest whispered with the rustle of leaves and the crackle of fire. A circle of tents sprawled around a central bonfire, its light dancing across crude banners painted with streaks of crimson. The Crimson Blade Bandits were no simple highwaymen. Their camp was a fortress of sharpened stakes and watchtowers, their ranks disciplined, their weapons polished and cared for. Dozens of scarred men sat sharpening blades, cleaning crossbows, or drinking from heavy kegs. Every man bore the same crimson streak painted across his weapon, the mark of their allegiance. And at the heart of the camp, a giant of a man sat sharpening a great curved blade. His tusks gleamed in the firelight. His muscles, scarred and knotted with years of battle, rippled beneath leather straps. His eyes were not the dull eyes of a brute, but sharp and calculating, like a predator studying prey. Dika, the half-orc blade master. Each stroke of his whetstone sang across the steel, steady and precise. Men gave him a wide berth, for even among killers, Dika's presence was suffocating. A drunken bandit staggered too close, spilling ale onto Dika's boots. The great blade moved once. The man's head hit the ground before his body knew it was dead. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of the whetstone resuming its work. No one dared breathe too loudly. Dash dash dash. At the edge of the camp, a hooded figure emerged, slender, graceful, and out of place among the bloodthirsty brutes. His cloak was marked with the sigil of a noble house, a silver hawk clutching a spear. He bowed slightly. Master Dika, the gold beer merchants grow bold. Their caravans travel without fear, as though they believe your crimson blades nothing more than shadows. Dika did not look up from his blade. And why do I care? His voice was low, gravelly, and calm. The noble smiled faintly. Because they prosper. Because if they rise, your bandits will be hunted. And because he tapped his chest, emphasizing the sigil of his house, pay you well to make certain the Goldbeer family bleeds. At that, Dika's lips curled into something resembling a grin. Coin is good, blood is better. He stood, towering over the noble, the great curved blade gleaming in the firelight. Tell your master this, the next Goldbeer caravan will not merely be robbed. It will be butchered. I will leave their corpses hanging from trees so that all who pass will know the Crimson Blade owns these lands. The noble's smile widened. That is all we ask. Leave no survivors. Dika's laughter rumbled across the camp, dark and eager. Around him, the bandits cheered, slamming their weapons against the ground. Blood, blood for the Crimson Blade. The night filled with their roar, echoing through the firewood forest like the cry of wolves on the hunt. Dash dash dash. Back in Goldbeer Manor. Word of the massacre spread quickly. 2 merchant caravans had been found destroyed, their wagons burned, their guards slaughtered. Survivors spoke of a half-orc wielding a crimson blade, cutting down men as though they were wheat before a scythe. In the study of Goldbeer Manor, Glick sat in silence as his steward reported the news. The Crimson Blade Bandits, my lord. They've grown bold. Witnesses claim their leader fights like a demon, a half-orc who wields his blade with mastery far beyond common brigands. Glick's fingers drummed on the desk. Dika, the steward's eyes widened. You know of him, my lord. Only by reputation, Glick said softly. Memories not his own, those of the original Glick Goldbeer, stirred in his mind. Rumors of a mercenary turned bandit, trained in both barbarian fury and sword discipline. A blade master who could shatter shields with raw strength, yet strike with precision like a duelist. A dangerous foe indeed. But what chilled him more was the second report. There are whispers, the steward continued, lowering his voice, that the Crimson Blades are being supported, fed, supplied, by one of our rivals in the court. A noble family with much to gain if the Goldbeer merchants fall. Glick's eyes narrowed. Which family? We cannot confirm, my lord. But the hawk sigil was seen upon one of the messengers. The name burned in Glick's mind. The Silverhawk family, merchants in name, but vultures in truth. They had long coveted Goldbeer trade routes. So this was not merely banditry. This was politics played with blood and steel. Dash dash dash. Glick rose from his chair, his mind already racing. So, Dika, you are not merely a marauder. You are a blade wielded by my enemies. Good. That makes this simple. If I cut off the blade, the hand that wields it will be exposed. He walked to the window, looking out over the moonlit training yard where his newly armed guards drilled with enchanted weapons. Beyond them, in the sub-magic pen, his frogs croaked softly, their spell-infused bodies humming with unnatural power. A cold smile touched his lips. Dika, half-orc blade master, he whispered. You've chosen the wrong family to cross. The system pulsed faintly in his mind. Greater than quest triggered. Eliminate the Crimson Blade bandits. Reward. Unknown. Warning. Enemy leader Dika possesses transcendent martial affinity. Combat risk. High. Glick's smile only widened. High risk. Higher rewards. The Crimson Blades thought themselves predators. Soon, they would learn what it felt like to be hunted. Chapter 12 The Bait Part 1. The morning mist clung to the forest road, shrouding the wagons in a veil of silver. Wooden wheels creaked, horses snorted, and guards in patched cloaks walked beside the caravan as though they were nothing more than weary merchant escorts. To any watching eyes, it was a tempting sight. 2 wagons laden with crates, a handful of guards, and a banner bearing the Goldbeer family crest fluttering weakly in the wind. A small caravan, ripe for plunder. Which was exactly the point. Hidden beneath the tarps of the wagons were not bolts of cloth or barrels of wine, but enchanted crossbows, shields, and spears, all disguised with glamour charms. And within the silver ring on Glick's hand, a chorus of spell-infused frogs croaked impatiently, eager for release. Seated at the front of the lead wagon, Glick wore the simple robes of a merchant, his golden hair tied back, his expression that of a nervous noble dabbling in trade. But beneath the disguise, his eyes scanned the treeline with sharp intent. The system's pulse echoed in his mind. Greater than quest active. Eliminate the Crimson Blade bandits. Objective. Survive ambush. Neutralize leader Dika. Condition. Preserve secrecy of host's true identity. Glick smirked faintly. Ambush, is it? Let them come. I have a surprise of my own. Dash dash dash. The Goldbeer guards played their parts well. Armor that shimmered with blade ward enchantments was concealed beneath rough traveling cloaks. Crossbows loaded with fire and acid bolts rested under wagon seats, their glow hidden. To an untrained eye, they were nothing but weary men at arms. But Glick had drilled them mercilessly the past week. Every man knew the signal, every man knew his place. When the bandits struck, the caravan would transform from prey into predator. And the frogs, oh, the frogs would feast. Dash dash dash. The forest thickened as they traveled deeper into Phi Wood. The road narrowed, roots cracking through the cobblestones. Mist clung heavier here, muffling sound. Glick kept his posture calm, though his senses strained. He could feel it, the prickle of eyes in the dark, the faint scrape of metal against leather. The Crimson Blade bandits were near. His steward, riding beside him, leaned closer. My lord, are you certain of this plan? If they see through the ruse. They won't, Glick interrupted softly. His lips curved faintly. Bandits see what they wish to see. Coin, prey, blood. They will not look deeper until it is too late. The steward swallowed but said no more. Dash dash dash. From the cover of the trees, a dozen figures crouched, their armor patched with crimson streaks. Eyes gleamed with hunger as they studied the wagons rolling below. Goldbeer crest, one whispered. Merchants, lightly guarded, easy pickings. Another grinned, licking his lips. And the boss wanted a message. Hanging their corpses will do nicely. From behind them, a deep voice growled. Wait. The men stiffened as Dika stepped forward, towering above them, his crimson blade slung across his back. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the caravan. Something about it itched at him. Too neat, too calm. But then again, arrogance was common among minor nobles. Perhaps this viscount truly thought his banner alone would protect him. Dika's tusked grin spread. Doesn't matter. Kill them. Burn the wagons. Leave one survivor to crawl back and spread the tale. The bandits grinned savagely, tightening their grips on weapons. Dash dash dash. The caravan rolled into a natural choke point, a narrow stretch of road hemmed by steep embankments and looming trees. The perfect place for an ambush. Glick's heart thudded, but his expression remained calm as he guided the reins. His fingers brushed against the divine ring holding of beasts, feeling the croaking presence within. Come, Dika, take the bait. The forest grew silent. No bird song, no rustle of beasts. Only the creak of wheels and the faint breath of mist. Then, now, bandits erupted from the treeline, crimson-painted blades flashing, crossbows raised. Arrows rained down from above, while a dozen more surged from the undergrowth with bloodthirsty cries. The caravan guards feigned panic, stumbling back, raising their cloaks in false terror. Glick's lips curled into a predator's smile. The system chimed. Greater than enemy hostiles detected. Crimson Blade bandits. Ambush initiated. Host advantage. Prepared counterstrike. The trap was set, and soon, the hunters would learn what it meant to become prey. Chapter 13 The Trap Closes Part 2. The whistle of arrows split the mist, slamming into the wagons, yet instead of screams, the shafts shattered harmlessly against faintly glowing shields. Cloaks fell away, revealing armor infused with blade ward sigils, gleaming faintly with runic light. The panicked guards straightened as one, their fear vanishing, faces hard as steel. Now, Glick's voice rang out. The wagons, tarps ripped back, revealing racks of enchanted crossbows. Firebolt-tipped bolts ignited in a cascade of sparks, while acid-green runes pulsed along another set. Twang, 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 a rain of flaming death roared into the treeline. Bandits who had been grinning moments before shrieked as fire tore through them, acid sizzling on their armor and flesh. From Glick's hand, the divine ring blazed. Come forth. The air shimmered, and a tide of giant frogs burst into the clearing. But these were no ordinary beasts. Their throats glowed with frost, lightning, and eerie necrotic mist. Some crackled with sparks of shocking grasp, others croaked and released blasts of frostbite, while one grotesque frog's tongue lashed out, leaving a streak of black and chill touch on its prey. The bandits froze for a heartbeat, disbelief plastered across their faces. What are those? Monsters, he has monsters. Their panic came too late. The frogs leapt, tongues snapping, spells bursting in grotesque beauty. A warrior's chest caved as a lightning lure dragged him screaming into the jaws of another. Another staggered back, his flesh frosting over, before a frog swallowed him whole, his muffled screams bubbling into silence. The battlefield descended into chaos. Dash dash dash. From the treeline, Dika's yellow eyes widened, not in fear, but in savage delight. Well, his voice rumbled like thunder as he stepped forward, towering above his men. The little Viscount had fangs after all. He unsheathed his weapon, a massive crimson-painted blade longer than a man was tall. The air seemed to ripple around him as he swung it in a testing arc, cutting through the mist itself. Out of the way, he roared, shoving aside two of his stumbling subordinates. This one is mine. Bandits cheered, rallying at the sight of their leader. Their panic tempered into desperation, and they pressed forward once more. Dika charged. The ground shook with every step of his boots. His muscles rippled with barbaric strength, each swing of his crimson blade leaving afterimages in the air. He cleaved through a frog mid-leap, its body splitting in two as black ichor sprayed. Another snapped its tongue at him, only for Dika to catch it with his free hand and yank, splitting the beast apart with brute force. Frogs. He spat on the corpse. Pathetic. Dash dash dash. From his position, Glick's expression hardened. He could feel the pressure radiating from Dika. This was no ordinary bandit. His barbarian blood and blade mastery placed him on the edge of transcendent combatability. The system pulsed. Greater than target analyzed. Dika, half-orc barbarian blade master. Threat level. Lethal. Weakness. Over-reliance on brute force. Limited defense against magic-type continuous damage. Noted, Glick muttered. He raised his hand, mana flowing through his body as he spoke the trigger. Frogs, converge. As one, the swarm shifted tactics. Instead of scattering their abilities, they turned toward Dika. Frostbite mist swirled, lightning crackled, and necrotic tongues lashed. Dika laughed and swung his crimson blade, cleaving through spell after spell, but even he couldn't shrug them all off. Sparks danced across his skin, patches of ice clung to his arms, and one tongue left a streak of necrosis along his shoulder. His grin widened, bloodlust blazing in his eyes. Finally, a real fight. Dash dash dash. The battlefield rang with the clash of steel, fire, and croaking thunder. Goldbeer guards held their ground with their enchanted gear, their crossbows spewing fire and acid bolts in disciplined volleys. Bandits fell screaming, some burning, some writhing as their weapons dissolved into slag. Yet the crimson blades fought like cornered wolves. They hurled themselves into the fray with savage abandon, blades biting deep. Blood stained the road, the scent of smoke and iron thick in the air. At the center of it all, Dika carved a path of destruction, his crimson blade whistling arcs of death. Every time a frog leapt, it was bisected. Every guard who misstepped was crushed. He was a storm, and the storm was coming straight for Glick. Dash dash dash. The barbarian's shadow loomed. So, you're the little Viscount with tricks. I'll enjoy mounting your head on my wall. Glick met his gaze calmly, though sweat beaded at his brow. You mistake cleverness for weakness, barbarian. His hand flicked. A frog leapt from his side, its throat glowing as it spat a streak of black mist, chill touch. The necrotic hand clawed at Dika's chest, slowing his advance. But the half-orc only grinned wider. Good. Make me bleed. He raised his crimson blade and lunged. The duel had begun. Chapter 14 Duel of Blood and Spell Part 3. The clash of steel and spell shook the forest road. Guards roared, bandits screamed. Frogs croaked spells into the chaos, but all of it blurred at the edges as Glick fixed his gaze on the half-orc bearing down on him. Dika's crimson blade descended like a falling star. Clang! Glick's blade ward shimmered at the last instant, deflecting the lethal arc. Still, the sheer force of the strike sent him skidding back, boots gouging deep furrows into the cobblestones. His arms shook with the reverberation, his body reminded that he was still only a zero-ring apprentice. But his mind was sharper than ever. Greater than warning. Host's physical stats insufficient to meet opponent's strength head-on. Recommendation. Layered spell tactics and beast convergence advised. Already on it, Glick muttered. Dash dash dash. Pathetic trickster. Dika bellowed, swinging his blade in wide arcs, each strike leaving crimson trails in the air. His movements were terrifying in their simplicity, no wasted effort, no hesitation, only raw speed and barbaric might. Another frog leapt forward, releasing frostbite. Icy mist clung to the half-orc's arms, slowing his swing for a heartbeat. In that gap, Glick whispered, "Firebolt." From his palm, flame roared. The bolt seared across the battlefield, slamming into Dika's chest and scorching through the fur-lined armor. The half-orc snarled, smoke rising from the burn. Then he laughed, a deep, rumbling growl. "Yes, burn me more," he charged, shrugging off the flames, his crimson blade cutting in a vicious upward sweep. Glick barely twisted aside, the blade grazing his ribs. Pain flared, hot and sharp, but he gritted his teeth. If he lands a clean hit, I'm done. Dash dash dash. His mind raced. Direct blasts won't stop him. I need to use control, disrupt his rhythm. Merge. Lightning lure, frog no. 7. The system pulsed. Greater than spell fusion active. The chosen frog croaked, its throat sparking. A tendril of lightning lashed out, wrapping around Dika's arm. Electricity sizzled, muscles spasmed, and his grip faltered for the first time. Now, Glick thrust his hand forward. Thorn whip. Green vines burst from his palm, lashing out and wrapping around Dika's legs. The half-orc roared as the vines tightened, spikes digging into his flesh. Fall. With a savage yank, Glick dragged him off balance. The giant stumbled, crashing to one knee. Dash dash dash. The opportunity was fleeting, but Glick seized it. Chill touch. A skeletal hand burst from the earth, clawing at Dika's chest. Necrotic energy surged, blackening veins, draining vitality. The half-orc's grin faltered for the first time, replaced by a snarl of rage. "You dare!" With a bestial roar, he ripped the vines apart, his blade cleaving through the spectral hand. Blood dripped from his wounds, frost clung to his skin, and sparks still danced along his arm. But his eyes burned brighter than ever. "I'll split you in half, wizard!" He lunged with terrifying speed, his crimson blade arcing straight for Glick's throat. Dash dash dash. Time slowed. Glick saw the blade's edge glint, felt the system's urgent pulse, smelled the iron tang of his own blood. Greater than warning. Fatal strike incoming. Host survival chance. 7%. His mind screamed. Think. Now. Mana surged as he shouted. Frogs, merge barrage. Fire, frost, lightning, now. The battlefield seemed to explode. A storm of elements crashed down as half a dozen frogs unleashed their spells at once. Firebolt and frostbite collided, lightning snapped, necrotic mist spread. The converging torrent slammed into Dika's body mid-strike, staggering him just enough, for Glick to duck under the crimson blade. The weapon tore through his shoulder instead of his neck. Agony flared white-hot, but he lived. He rolled across the ground, clutching his wound, teeth gritted. Blood poured down his arm, but his eyes blazed with determination. "Not yet," he hissed. "I won't die here." Dash dash dash. Dika rose from the storm, smoke rising from his battered body. His armor hung in tatters, his skin blistered with burns, veins still blackened from necrotic touch. Yet he still stood, still grinning, tusks glistening with blood. "You fight well, Viscount," he growled, lifting his crimson blade once more. "But tricks won't save you forever. You'll run out of mana. I'll never run out of strength." Glick forced himself to his feet, swaying slightly, his blood dripping onto the stones. His lips curled into a thin smile. "You're wrong. I don't need to outlast you. I only need to outthink you." The system pulsed at his words, as if in agreement. The duel was far from over. Chapter 15 Breaking the Blade Part 4. The battlefield was a storm of fire and blood. Goldbeer guards fought in tight formation, their blade ward shields flashing as they deflected blow after blow. Enchanted crossbows rained fire and acid, setting trees ablaze and corroding enemy steel. Frogs leapt into the fray, belching lightning, frost, and necrotic energy. The Crimson Blade bandits, once so fierce, faltered. Their ranks broke under the relentless tide of spell and steel. Screams echoed through the mist as the forest floor became a charred, stinking mire. Yet none of it mattered to Glick. His world narrowed to the half-orc looming before him, crimson blade raised, tusked grin splitting his bloodied face. Dash dash dash. Dika swung. The crimson greatsword howled as it cut through the air, a streak of brute force and killing intent. Glick ducked low, sparks flying as the blade sheared through a stone pillar behind him like butter. The half-orc laughed, sweat and blood dripping from his scarred body. Still running, little wizard? Still hiding behind your tricks? Glick's breath came ragged, his shoulder bleeding heavily. But his eyes glowed cold, calculating. Greater than warning. Mana reserves 42%. Host condition critical. Suggestion. Compound fusion attack. His mind snapped into clarity. Yes, combine them. He raised his hand. Frogs. Synchronize. Dash dash dash. The surviving frogs croaked in unison, their throats swelling with light. Frost swirled into flame, lightning coiled through necrotic mist, and vines slithered with elemental fury. Dika snarled and charged, unwilling to wait. Die. The crimson blade came down. Merge spell module. Triple fusion, now. Glick roared. The system pulsed. Greater than fusion activated. Firebolt plus frostbite plus lightning lure. Result. Plasma storm whip. From Glick's hand erupted a blazing whip of crackling plasma, searing fire wrapped in frost, electricity coiling through it like a living serpent. With a crack like thunder, it lashed across the battlefield. Dash dash dash. The whip struck Dika's blade. Fire burned along the steel, frost locked it in ice, and lightning jolted through his arms. The crimson sword shuddered, cracks racing along its length. Dika's eyes widened. What? Fall, Glick hissed. He yanked. The whip dragged Dika off balance, his enormous body crashing into the dirt. The crimson blade snapped in half with a deafening crack, shards scattering across the ground. The half-orc roared in fury, scrambling to his knees. You dare. Glick didn't let him finish. Chill touch. Thorn whip. Vicious mockery. Spectral hands clawed at Dika's chest, vines lashed around his neck, and an echoing voice filled his skull. Your strength is nothing. You are already defeated. The barbarian thrashed, tusks bared, veins bulging. But the system pulsed again. Greater than weakness exploited. Opponent stamina at 12%. Finisher recommended. End it. Dash dash dash. Glick raised his hand one final time. The frogs croaked in harmony, their combined voices resonating like a choir of doom. Mana surged, threads of every element weaving together into a singular point of destruction. Merge. Acid plus fire plus frost plus lightning. The system chimed. Greater than quadrifusion spell. Cataclysm ray. A beam of elemental annihilation erupted, engulfing Dika in a torrent of acid, fire, frost, and lightning. His scream tore through the battlefield, shaking trees, echoing into the night. When the light faded, nothing remained of the barbarian leader but charred, smoldering ash. The Crimson Blade bandits froze. Their eyes widened at the sight of their fallen champion. And then, like a dam breaking, they broke. Dika's dead. Run, run. They scattered into the forest, throwing down their weapons, fleeing from the spell-forged nightmare they had dared to provoke. Dash dash dash. Silence settled, broken only by the crackle of burning trees and the croak of spell-infused frogs. The Goldbeer guards raised their weapons high, roaring in triumph. Victory! Victory for the Viscount! Glick stood at the center, bloodied but unbowed, his chest heaving. The system pulsed softly in his mind. Greater than quest complete. Eliminate Crimson Blade bandits. Rewards. Permanent stat increase +2 spirit, +1 constitution. 2% affinity gain from fused creatures. Unlock condition for advanced fusion progress, met. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Good. Very good. But inside, his thoughts were sharp. This was only one bandit company. If a rival noble backed them, then I've only just stepped onto the battlefield of power struggles. I'll need more spells, more beasts, and a stronger mask to hide behind. The flames of war crackled higher. And the Viscount of Goldbeer was ready to feed them. Chapter 16 First Ring. The night after the battle burned itself into silence. The corpses of bandits smoldered in the embers of their own folly, and the road that once echoed with screams now lay quiet under the canopy of the Fi wood. But within the Goldbeer estate, a different storm raged. Glick sat cross-legged in his private chamber, his robe stripped down to the waist, bandages binding his wounds. His breath slowed into a steady rhythm as the system pulsed in his mind, guiding him toward the edge of breakthrough. Greater than condition met. Host has accumulated sufficient battle experience and system synchronization. Initiating advancement protocol. Warning. Process will place extreme strain on body and mind. Proceed. Glick exhaled slowly, his lips curled faintly. Proceed. Pain exploded through him instantly. His consciousness was ripped into the depths of his own soul, where a vast, stormy ocean stretched before him, his spiritual sea. Until now it had been shallow, fragile, waves breaking against brittle banks. But now the system descended like a comet, its crystalline voice reverberating through the waters. Greater than, expanding host spiritual sea. Condensing mana core. Stage 1. The ocean roared, waves surging as his consciousness convulsed. Energy poured into him, violent and untamed. His veins burned, his bones screamed, his thoughts blurred at the edges of madness. Yet through the agony, he clung to his will. I am Edward McAllister. I am Glick Goldbeer. I will not break. The storm peaked. And then, clarity. The waves settled into a deeper, vaster ocean. At its center floated a faintly glowing ring of mana, stable and bright. His first. Glick's eyes snapped open. His breath left him in a shuddering exhale, and for a moment the room pulsed with the pressure of his new power. The candle flames bent toward him, the air itself vibrating. He smiled thinly. So this is what it feels like, to step forward. The system chimed. Greater than congratulations, host. Advancement complete. Stage 1 Ring Wizard Apprentice. Spiritual Sea capacity. Expanded. Mana recovery. Doubled. Stat boost. +2 intelligence, +2 spirit, +1 constitution. More notifications followed in rapid succession. Greater than, spell merge module expanded. Options available. Creature item +2, 0 ring spells. Creature item +1, first ring spell. Combat simulator unlocked. Function. Recreate past battles or simulate new scenarios against projected opponents. Note. Death in simulation will not harm host, but pain will be felt. Glick's eyes gleamed. A combat simulator, that means I can refine tactics endlessly, without losing men or resources. The implications stretched before him like a tapestry. With enough training cycles, he could polish strategies until they were flawless. Even wizards many stages above him wouldn't hold that advantage. To test his new strength, he lifted his hand. Mana surged more smoothly than ever before, flowing into the ray of frost spell. A shard of ice condensed instantly in his palm, sharper, denser, thrumming with lethal cold. He flicked it forward. Crack. The shard embedded itself in the stone wall, frost spreading in jagged veins across the surface. Stronger, cleaner, faster. His lips curved in satisfaction. 1 ring spells. With the systems merging, the possibilities are endless. He could already see it. A frog fused with 2 0-ring spells at once, or a warbeast infused with a full 1-ring combat spell. Entirely new monsters, entirely new tactics. And that was only the beginning. He leaned back, closing his eyes, letting the system's hum settle into the rhythm of his heartbeat. His body ached, his blood still thin from the battle, but his mind soared. This is only the first step. From 0-ring apprentice to 1 ring, soon, to formal wizard. Then adept. Then beyond. But one thing is clear. His gaze hardened. I am no longer simply Edward the scientist, nor only Glick the Viscount. I am something new, a wizard armed with a system of war. The candles flickered, casting shadows of power across the chamber walls. And far beyond, in the dark corners of the kingdom, whispers of the Crimson Blade's annihilation had already begun to spread. Whispers that would draw attention, both wanted and unwanted, toward the Goldbeer name. But Glick was ready. Now, he had the power to answer. Chapter 17 Truth Behind the Bandits. The morning after his advancement was quiet, too quiet. The Goldbeer estate should have been filled with relief, even celebration, after the annihilation of the Crimson Blade bandits. Merchants once terrorized by raids were already sending envoys of gratitude, caravans creaked once more along the trade roads, and the militia had returned bearing spoils of weapons and gold. Yet in the main hall, Glick sat on his high-backed chair with a shadowed gaze. Victory had been too clean. Too convenient. He drummed his fingers against the armrest, the weight of his new mana ring humming faintly in his chest. The breakthrough still burned in his veins, but his mind refused to bask in triumph. Instead, it turned like a whetstone grinding steel. Dika was a barbarian, a brute with skill, yes, but bandits don't organize ambushes against heavily guarded caravans without inside knowledge. And they certainly don't stockpile enchanted blades without a supplier. The steward, old Merrick, cleared his throat beside him. His voice was careful, respectful. "My lord, the men are calling for celebration. The crimson blades have been broken. Many say your name will be sung from one end of the province to the other." Glick's lips curled faintly, though his eyes remained cold. "Songs are fleeting. Blood and gold last longer. Tell me, Merrick, do you believe it was only bandits?" The steward faltered. "They wore the marks of raiders, their camp bore the stink of outlaws." Yet, he hesitated, then bowed his head lower. The quality of their steel, the orderliness of their ledgers, and the manner in which they divided spoils, it was not common rabble. Exactly as Glick thought. He leaned forward. "Bring the records we seized from their hideout. All of them. Dash dash dash." The bandit camp had yielded more than weapons. Buried beneath crates of stolen grain and barrels of wine had been a collection of leather-bound books, too neat, too carefully kept for mere highwaymen. When the militia had delivered them, most assumed they were loot tallies or gambling debts. Now they lay spread across the long oaken table in the hall. Glick adjusted his spectacles, an affectation from his other life that lent him gravitas here, and flipped one open. Columns of numbers stared back. Dates, locations, values. Caravans looted, coin tallies, the resale of goods. Yet in the margins, sigils marked with wax were pressed into parchment, the crest of a falcon stooping upon prey. The mark of House Valabridge. Glick's brows drew together. Valabridge was no minor house. They were rivals, yes, bordering lands to the east, perpetually resentful of goldbeer tariffs and the prosperity brought by their trade routes. But for a noble house to fund banditry, to stain their hands with such obvious villainy, that was no small thing. Merrick shifted uncomfortably as he too studied the crest. "My lord, this is treason. If proven, the king himself would have cause to strip their lands." "Which is why it will not be proven so easily," Glick murmured. His mind turned rapidly. If the Valabridges are this bold, then they believe themselves protected. Either by coin that runs deeper than ours, or by allies who would rather see goldbeer blood spilled than their own. He closed the ledger with a snap. "Tell no one of this, Merrick. Not the guards, not the merchants, not even the household retainers. Until I understand the full scope, silence will be our shield." The steward bowed, lips pressed tight. Dash dash dash. That night, Glick donned his alter ego, the hooded robes of the artificer. His image shimmered faintly with illusion, his face veiled by shadow, voice altered by the system's minor enhancements. Under this guise, he ventured into the lower districts of his town where whispers ran thicker than wine. The dark Phi market might be distant, but every port of call had its shadows. Smugglers, informants, and petty thieves, if one had the coin, they had the tongue. In a candlelit cellar beneath a cooper's shop, he met with a fixer known only as Crow. "You bring questions, artificer," Crow rasped, feathered cloak brushing the dirt floor. "Dangerous ones. The crimson blades are dead." "Why dig in graves?" "Because the grave still stinks," Glick replied, laying a pouch heavy with silver on the table. "Tell me who supplied them." Crow's black eyes glimmered as he counted the weight by touch. "Supplies, yes. Blades sharper than peasant iron, potions too potent for cutthroats. Some whispered of arcane sigils smuggled from mage towers. But all trails circle back to one patron. Name him." "House Valabridge," Crow said simply. "But not the lord, his younger brother, Esser Alaric. Too ambitious for his station, too hungry for coin. He feeds the dogs and unleashes them where profit lies." Glick's jaw tightened. So it was not the entire house, but a faction within it. That made things both easier and more dangerous. "Is he acting alone?" Crow shook his head. "No man funds warbands without allies. He has protection, a hand behind the curtain. Some say a wizard of the second ring, exiled from the tower for forbidden practices. Others whisper it is a priest who broke with his order. Truth, murky." Glick felt the weight of the revelation settle over him. Bandits were one thing, nobles another. But wizards turned everything into peril. Dash dash dash. Back within the safety of his manor, Glick paced the study. His mind spun with calculations, possibilities. If Valabridge seeks to weaken me, they will not stop with bandits. The loss of the Crimson Blades is a blow, but Esser Alaric will regroup, perhaps more subtly. And if a rogue wizard backs him, then my secret becomes more vital than ever. The system chimed softly. Greater than new quest detected. Expose the hand behind the crimson blades. Objective. Trace the source of their supplies and uncover Esser Alaric's allies. Reward. System upgrade, spell fusion stability plus 10%. Glick smirked despite himself. Even his system acknowledged the gravity of the plot. At dawn, he summoned his most trusted kin. His cousin Elira, sharp of wit and keeper of the estate's finances, his uncle Dorn, commander of the household guard, and Merrick, ever-faithful steward. They gathered around the long table as Glick revealed what he had learned. Elira's eyes widened at the crest burned into the ledgers. If this is true, then House Valabridge has already crossed into rebellion. Should we not send this directly to the Duke? Let the crown's justice fall upon them. No, Glick said sharply. He tapped the table, every syllable crisp. If we expose them now, they will burn the evidence and twist the tale. We would be painted as liars, fabricators, perhaps even accused of staging the bandit raids ourselves. No, we need undeniable proof. Proof that survives the court's scrutiny. Dorn's fist clenched. Then let us march. Take men and steel and show them the cost of crossing Goldbeer blood. Brute force is what they expect, Glick countered. They want us rash. No, uncle, this game is of coin, ink, and shadow. We will gather allies quietly, strengthen our lands, and when the time is right, crush them in one stroke. The room fell silent, but slowly, both Elira and Dorn nodded. Merrick, however, leaned forward, voice low. Then, my lord, what of the rogue wizard? Glick's expression hardened. Leave him to me. Later, when the estate had quieted and the stars pricked the velvet sky, Glick returned to his study. He opened the combat simulator for the first time, curious to test its new functions. Greater than scenario loaded. Duel against second ring wizard estimated power model. The world around him shimmered, dissolving into a spectral arena. Across from him stood a faceless figure cloaked in arcane light, mana burning with oppressive force. The duel began instantly. Bolts of fire and force screamed toward him. Glick barely raised a ward before the impact hurled him backward. His fused frog beasts leapt to shield him, but spells tore through them like parchment. His counters barely scratched the foe's defenses. Moments later, he lay broken on the simulated floor, chest heaving, body racked with phantom pain. Greater than defeat. The system's voice was calm. Greater than analysis. Host lacks sufficient power to confront a higher ring opponent directly. Recommendation. Employ fusion strategy, environmental manipulation, and indirect tactics. Glick sat up slowly, sweat soaking his brow, but his lips curled in grim determination. Good. Then I will learn. I will break a second ring wizard not through raw power, but through science, strategy, and the system's gifts. Just as I broke the crimson blades. His eyes gleamed with cold fire. Let the Valabridges scheme. Let their wizard hide in shadow. I will drag them into the light, and when I do, there will be no escape. Beyond the estate walls, rumors spread like wildfire. Merchants spoke of the Goldbeer victory, of a mysterious artificer aiding their cause. In taverns and courts, whispers grew louder. If the crimson blades were destroyed so suddenly, who truly stood behind them? And in the halls of House Valabridge, Esser Alaric clenched his goblet until wine spilled over his hand, rage boiling in his veins. His bandits slain, his plans disrupted, his pride wounded. But his lips curved into a cruel smile. So, the little Viscount thinks himself clever. Let him bask in his triumph. Soon, he will learn what it means to make an enemy of Valabridge, and of powers darker still. The game had only just begun. Chapter 18 Shopping Spree. The ride to the capital stretched across 2 full days, but Glick hardly noticed the passage of time. His mind was too preoccupied with lists, long, detailed lists written in his tight hand across parchment. Spells to acquire, beasts to purchase, materials for fusion experiments, tools for enchantment. The Goldbeer estate had stabilized in the wake of the bandit purge, but stability was never enough. Glick knew too well that stagnation was the first step toward downfall. His enemies would not rest. Esser Alaric Valabridge was plotting even now, sharpening daggers in the dark. To stay ahead, Glick needed more power, more options. And there was only one place in all of Firewood where one could purchase nearly anything, if one had the coin. The three-legged crow's hut. The capital of Firewood was a city that straddled 2 worlds. On its outer edges sprawled merchant districts, noisy and chaotic, filled with hawkers, caravans, and the scent of spices and sweat. Beyond the gates of white stone lay the noble quarter, its streets wider, its buildings loftier, its guards sharper-eyed. And in the heart of it all, rising like an ebon thorn, stood the three-legged crow's hut. It wasn't truly a hut. The name was either a jest or an insult made into branding genius. In reality, it was a sprawling complex of 7 towers joined by bridges of black iron, each tower carved with runes that shimmered faintly under the sun. At the highest spire perched a colossal sculpture of a crow with 3 legs, wings spread wide, feathers seeming almost alive. Merchants called it a market. Wizards called it a sanctuary. Rivals called it a monopoly. To Glick, it was an opportunity. A hush settled as he entered the courtyard. Lines of buyers snaked before each tower, though these were no common folk. Robed apprentices clutched scroll cases. Nobles in embroidered doublets whispered with retainers. Adventurers strode in with weapons at their belts, eyes sharp with the hunger of those who had tasted peril. At the gate, he was stopped by 2 guards, not soldiers, but wizard mercenaries, each wearing amulets that pulsed faintly with mana. Their gazes were assessing, not hostile. Name and business. Glick adjusted his illusionary robes. As the artificer, his voice carried the authority of mystery. I come to purchase spells, creatures, and rare auxiliaries. Gold beer accounts stand ready for trade. The guard's eyes flickered faintly as if checking a record. Then they bowed slightly. Welcome, honored artificer. The hut recognizes all transactions under the laws of neutrality. May your gold flow as freely as your mana. With that, he was admitted. The interior of the 3-legged crow's hut was no less impressive. The first tower was dedicated to spells. Rows upon rows of crystal cases lined the chamber, each case holding scrolls that glowed faintly with arcane energy. Labels in neat calligraphy indicated the spell's name, ring level, and cost. Glick's eyes swept the displays, hunting specifically for 0-ring spells. Thunderclap, Toll the Dead, True Strike, Sword Burst, Shape Water, Primal Savagery, he murmured as his gaze landed on each in turn. With a flick of his finger, he signaled the clerk. Bundle them, he said. All 6. The clerk, a thin elf in gray robes, bowed and began writing notes with quick precision. Next came the 1-ring spells, far more valuable. Their cases were guarded by additional wards, and buyers were watched closely. Fear, Absorb Elements, Alarm, Bane, Bless, Beast Bond, Catapult. 7 spells, each one a cornerstone for future fusion. Each one a piece of leverage. The clerk raised his brows slightly. 7 first-ring scrolls in a single transaction. The price will be considerable, sir. Glick's lips quirked. I did not come here to haggle. The second tower was dedicated to creatures. The air smelled of hay, musk, and faint ozone. Iron-barred pens stretched in long rows, each enchanted to hold beasts within. A handler in leather armor approached, bowing. What does the artificer seek? Troops, Glick said simply. Beasts that can be fused, trained, or deployed. A balanced mix. The handler gestured, and assistants drew back cloth coverings. Within cages, the creatures shifted restlessly. 5 dire wolves, pelts black as midnight, eyes burning with intelligence. 5 giant hyenas, their laughter a low growl that raised hackles. 3 giant eagles, wings rustling with restrained power. These, the handler said, are tamed, conditioned, and bonded with collars keyed to obedience runes. I'll take them, Glick said. The handler blinked. All of them, Glick repeated. The clerk from earlier had followed, scribbling furiously. The total was ballooning into absurdity. But Glick's mind was elsewhere, already calculating potential fusions. Dire wolf plus blade ward. Eagle plus lightning lure. Hyena plus fear. The possibilities made his blood hum. The third tower was more controversial. Here the air was heavy with a silence thick as chains. Rows of cages held demi-human slaves, eyes wary, defeated, or defiant. A goblin snarled as Glick passed. A kobold whimpered. A hobgoblin stood stiff with military bearing. A lizard man hissed softly. The lone bugbear sat hunched, massive and brooding. The handler's voice was careful, almost apologetic. These are all legal under the hut's contracts. War slaves, debt slaves, captured raiders. Their papers are in order. Glick studied them quietly. He didn't enjoy the sight. But practicality outweighed sentiment. Demi-humans could be fused, trained, experimented with. Each represented a new path for the system. I'll take 25 goblins. 25 kobolds. 5 hobgoblins. 3 lizard men. And the bugbear. The handler nearly dropped his quill. Sir, that is nearly half our current stock. Then consider it a boon, Glick replied coldly. The hut profits, I acquire what I need. No more words. The handler bowed low, sweat on his brow. Dash dash dash. By the time Glick left the towers, his account had been drained of tens of thousands of gold crowns. Enough to bankrupt a minor barony. Enough to buy loyalty from 3 mercenary companies. Enough to live in decadence for a lifetime. But Glick did not flinch. Money was a tool. What mattered was what the system would do with these acquisitions. Already, he could feel the spell merge module humming, eager to record and fuse the new spells. The thought of catapult fused with thunderclap, or dire wolf fused with absorb elements, sent shivers down his spine. The cost would repay itself tenfold in power. Dash dash dash. On the final day, Glick was summoned to the upper tower by none other than adept wizard Corvinus, the 10-ring master who led the 3-legged crow's hut. Corvinus was an imposing figure. Tall, hair silvered but eyes sharp as blades, his robe woven with symbols of wealth and wards. He regarded Glick with open curiosity. You purchase as though building an army, Corvinus said, voice smooth but laced with amusement. Few come to the hut with such decisiveness. Tell me, artificer, what is your intent? Glick bowed slightly, maintaining the aura of his false identity. My intent is simple, profit. The Goldbeer family has prospered through trade. I see no reason why wizardry should be excluded from commerce. Spells, beasts, items, all are resources. Why should not a wizard merchant company rise from Goldbeer lands? Corvinus's lips curved into a faint smile. Ambitious, dangerous, but possible. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. The hut does not forbid competition, though we do regulate it. Should you wish to register a company under our oversight, it will grant legitimacy, protection, and access to trade networks. Of course, it will also bind you under our laws and tithes. A trap, of course. But also an opportunity. Glick inclined his head. Then let us speak of terms. Dash dash dash. By the time he departed the capital, his wagons creaked with cages, scrolls, and crates of supplies. His guards eyed the hall with awe and fear alike. The Goldbeer crest fluttered proudly, but beneath the banners rode a man whose mind raced with plans. Spells to fuse, creatures to mutate, soldiers to arm. The Crimson Blades had been but the first move. The Valabridges, Esser Alaric, the rogue wizard behind them, all would soon face the weight of what Glick was building. And now, with the recognition of the 3-legged crow's hut, he had the beginnings of something larger than even bandits or rival nobles. A wizard merchant company, a power of coin and spell both. The shopping spree was over. The true game was only beginning. Chapter 19 The Seeds of a Merchant Empire. The carriage wheels rattled rhythmically against the cobblestone road as Glick Goldbeer leaned back into the padded interior. Outside, the city of Ferrithra bustled with life, oblivious to the schemes churning inside the mind of a man who, only weeks ago, had been little more than a forgotten apprentice. The ledger on his lap was filled with hastily written notes, each line representing a purchase or investment he had made in the last 2 days at the 3-legged crow's hut market. Spells, beasts, demi-human slaves, enchanted trinkets, scrolls, each item was a building block, a tool to be refined through his merge system. Greater than a goblin is weak, barely stronger than a child. A kobold is cowardly but clever. A lizard man, though brutish, can survive wounds that would kill most men. But when paired with spells, with magic gear, an army can be forged. Not soldiers, living weapons. He tapped his quill against the parchment. The ink blotched, but he did not care. The shape of his future was becoming clear. Seeds of power. Back in the Goldbeer estate, his newly acquired servants knelt in orderly rows. 50 goblins, 25 kobolds, 5 hobgoblins, 3 lizardmen, and a hulking bugbear. Behind them, 5 dire wolves, 5 giant hyenas, and 3 great eagles strained against their bindings. The sight would have been horrifying to most minor nobles. Such creatures were dangerous, untamable by ordinary means, but to Glick, they were clay waiting to be molded. The beast bond scroll he had acquired shimmered faintly in its sealed tube. It would be the key to bending these creatures permanently to his will, fusing loyalty into their very souls. And when combined with the space ring and the divine sanctuary scroll, he would soon have what he envisioned, a portable army, carried on his finger. The guards of the estate shifted uneasily as they passed by the pens. None dared speak, but whispers had begun circulating. Their young lord was dabbling in dangerous arts, collecting monsters, and consorting with shady merchants in the capital. Good. Fear was useful. It kept them loyal, for now. Alter ego in motion. Later that night, in the privacy of his study, Glick once more donned the illusion of his alter ego, the mysterious artificer and alchemist, a cloaked figure whose face was veiled by shifting shadows. Through this persona, he had already begun crafting contracts, correspondence, and rumors. In the eyes of the capital, the Goldbeer family had recently come into partnership with a wandering master wizard, one who valued their honesty and coin. It was a shield, a mask, and a weapon. For who would dare strike directly at a baron's house backed by an artificer capable of mass-producing enchanted items? But the mask had to be more than rumor. It needed proof. First experiments. At dawn, he began the first fusions with his newly acquired spells. A kobold was bound with true strike. The creature's eyes glowed faintly blue, its crude dagger now guided by supernatural precision. A goblin fused with sword burst, granting it a whirl of spectral blades that erupted when pressed. A dire wolf took on primal savagery, its fangs lengthening, dripping corrosive venom. Each fusion drained his spiritual energy, forcing him to pause, meditate, and recover before continuing. His body was still adapting to the strain of a one-ring wizard. Yet as the hours passed, his small army transformed. Where once stood weak, trembling creatures, now pulsed a dangerous aura. Individually, they were still manageable. But together, even seasoned mercenary bands would falter against them. Greater than an army of the forgotten, reshaped into weapons. A merchant's caravan with monsters hidden in its wagons. A noble's retinue guarded not by men, but by nightmares. The thought made him smile. Whispers of threats. By midday, a sealed letter arrived. The Goldbeer crest was stamped in red wax, but the handwriting was not his steward's. It was elegant, flowing, and dangerous. Greater than, to the esteemed house of Goldbeer, news has reached us of your recent activities in the capital. It pleases us to see your family prospering after years of stagnation. Perhaps you will honor us with a visit, to discuss opportunities of mutual interest. House Valabridge. Glick's eyes narrowed. The Valabridges again. Those snakes had already been implicated in the bandit raids. This invitation was nothing more than veiled scrutiny. They wanted to see what had changed, why the Goldbeers suddenly had coin and confidence. He could not afford to expose weakness, nor could he show too much strength. Balance was required. The merchant's game. That evening, Glick summoned his head steward and a handful of trusted guards. They gathered in the dining hall, the firelight casting sharp shadows on the walls. House Valabridge extends a hand, he said, tossing the letter onto the table. But it is the hand of a viper. We will accept their invitation, under the guise of our artificer patron. The steward's brow furrowed. My lord, is it wise? If they suspect, that is precisely why we must go. Let them see what I wish them to see. We will arrive as merchants, our wagons laden with goods. And if they think us weak, we shall show them strength. The guards shifted uneasily. None fully understood the scope of their young lord's ambitions, but his words carried a conviction that brooked no doubt. Plans within plans. When the meeting ended, Glick returned to his study. His mind spun like a wheel of gears, each thought another layer of strategy. The spells would be tested in controlled combat. The beasts would be merged further, refined into specialized roles, shock troops, scouts, assassins. The slaves would be trained, disguised as caravan guards, their magical enhancements hidden until the moment of battle. The artificer persona would be solidified, appearing at key moments to confuse spies and rivals. But deeper than all of that, he felt the pull of the system. His combat simulator hummed at the edge of his consciousness, begging to be unlocked. His spell merge module whispered promises of greater creations. He knew in his bones, that his journey had only begun. The bandits were a spark, the Valabridges a stumbling block. But in time, entire towers, kingdoms, and even gods would stand in his way. And when that day came, he would not be a mere noble's son, nor a false artificer, nor a humble merchant. He would be the architect of fusion. Chapter 20 Masks at the Valabridge Estate. The road to the Valabridge Manor wound through manicured groves and rolling hills. Every stone in the wall, every trimmed hedge whispered of wealth carefully displayed. For a noble family, appearances were as sharp a weapon as steel. Within the first carriage, Glick sat draped in a plain cloak, his face unreadable. He was not traveling as himself, not this time. The illusion he wove clung to his features like mist, reshaping him into the artificer, the mysterious alchemist who had, conveniently, taken the Goldbeer family under his wing. His steward sat beside him, hands clasped tightly on his lap. The man glanced at him often, as if trying to reconcile the cloaked wizard with the young lord he had sworn to serve. Remember, Glick murmured, voice deeper and resonant through the spell, I am the patron, you are the loyal steward. Speak when spoken to. Defer to me in all matters of trade. The steward nodded quickly. Behind them, a second carriage carried boxes of enchanted trinkets, low-grade items hastily produced over the past week. Cleaning charms, mending bands, fire-resistant cloth, nothing extraordinary. But presented well, they would dazzle merchants unused to mass-produced wizardry. And in the third wagon trailed a handful of his newly bonded creatures, disguised under cloaks and illusion talismans. Guards, in the eyes of outsiders. Weapons, in truth. The Valabridge Manor loomed large, its gates flanked by armored men. A banner of crimson and gold snapped in the wind, the sigil of a coiled serpent catching the sun. The guards inspected the caravan, eyes lingering on the crates. Glick let his gaze drift lazily over them, the weight of his fabricated presence pressing down. Even hardened soldiers stepped back, uncertain. Wizards, even false ones, commanded instinctive caution. Inside, the reception hall was a theater of opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm light. The air smelled faintly of roses and incense. Courtiers and lesser nobles lingered in groups, whispering, sipping wine. And at the far end, upon a dais, stood Lord Renar Valabridge. His hair was streaked with silver, his shoulders draped in a cloak of wolf pelts. His eyes were sharp, calculating. He spread his hands in false welcome. Esteemed guests, the House of Goldbeer honors us at last. And you must be. His gaze slid to Glick, the patron artificer we've heard so much about. The words dripped with honey, but the venom was plain. Glick inclined his head, letting his cloak sway with deliberate gravitas. Names are for contracts and gravestones. For now, you may call me Master of Fusion. A murmur rippled through the hall. Wizards rarely cloak themselves in such titles unless they had power to back them. Renar's smile tightened. Bold. I like boldness. Tell me then, Master, what interest does one of your reputation find in such a humble family as the Goldbeers? Glick's illusioned eyes glimmered faintly. A reputation I neither confirm nor deny. As for the Goldbeers, their coin is honest, and their ambitions, promising. Few nobles understand the value of progress. They do. The Valabridge lord's jaw tensed. The message was clear, the Goldbeers had something he did not. Before he could retort, Glick gestured to his steward. The man stepped forward, opening a crate. Inside lay rows of gleaming crossbows, their tips engraved with faint runes. Renar raised a brow. Baubles. Not baubles, Glick said smoothly. Mass enchantments. Crossbows that fire bolts wreathed in flame, armor that cleans itself, ropes that track their targets. Useful trinkets for common soldiers, produced not in years, but in weeks. The murmurs grew louder. Some nobles leaned closer, greed flashing in their eyes. Renar's gaze darkened. And you sell such things freely? Not freely, Glick corrected. At a price. Always at a price. A figure stepped forward from Renar's side, a woman clad in a silver gown, her hair braided with gems. Her eyes, however, were sharp as blades. This is Lady Cerisa, my daughter, Renar said, voice casual. Too casual. The woman's smile was thin. An artificer who hides his name, cloaks his face, and claims to sell miracles. Forgive me if I doubt. Perhaps you would demonstrate. The hall stilled. All eyes turned to him. It was a trap, of course. If his demonstration failed, he would be branded a charlatan. If it succeeded, they would hunger for his secrets. Glick raised a hand. A single crossbow floated into the air, guided by invisible threads of mana. With a flick of his fingers, it aimed at a steel statue in the corner of the hall. The trigger pulled itself. Whoosh! A bolt of searing flame streaked across the room, slamming into the statue. The steel glowed red-hot, smoke curling upward. Gasps erupted. Even Renar's eyes widened briefly before narrowing again. Glick lowered his hand calmly. A child could wield it. But in the hands of trained men, armies would march with fire at their fingertips. He let the silence hang. The rest of the evening flowed in measured currents. Wine was poured, questions asked, veiled offers made. Some nobles approached with flattery, others with suspicion. A few whispered outright offers to buy the artificer's loyalty from the Goldbeers. Through it all, Glick maintained the mask. Every word was weighed, every gesture calculated. By night's end, Renar Valabridge himself approached, his smile a predator's grin. Master of Fusion, I see now why the Goldbeers prosper. You are the storm behind their sails. But storms can change course. The words were a challenge. An invitation. A threat. Glick inclined his head slightly. Storms do not change course for those who merely watch from shore. The older lord's eyes flashed, but he said nothing more. Later, as the Goldbeer caravan departed under moonlight, the steward let out a long breath. My lord, forgive me, but I thought my heart would give out. To stand in that hall, to speak before those wolves, he shook his head. I do not know how the artificer, endured. Glick allowed the illusion to dissipate, his true face emerging once more. He looked tired, drained, but his eyes burned with quiet triumph. They saw what I wanted them to see, he said. Enough to fear, enough to covet, but not enough to act. And the Valabridges. Glick's smile was cold. They will test us soon. But when they do, we will not be prey. As the carriage rocked gently on the road home, the familiar chime echoed in his mind. Greater than system notification. Social deception successful. Reputation module. Seed stage. Effect. Host may now cultivate identities, gaining passive influence through fear, respect, or awe. Current persona. Master of fusion. Glick's fingers tightened on the window frame. Another module. Another tool. Greater than so even masks have power when wielded properly. Good. The road stretched into the darkness ahead, but his vision was already far beyond. Tonight had proven one thing. In the game of nobles and wizards, he could not only survive, he could dominate.